Thank you, Lisa, and thanks to GIF for an opportunity to be here with you today. It's kind of interesting to see a lot of commonalities that we're seeing throughout the week in terms of the activities in the intel commercial community, as well as the things that we're doing in the civil community. You know, I think we all would agree that geospatial intelligence is just not constricted to the defense, security, or intelligence community anymore, but it really underpins and really supports a lot of the work that we do in the civil space as well. So this afternoon, I'd like to take an opportunity to share with you some of the things that we're doing within the FGDC that I think are quite related to the themes and things we're hearing this week. As you heard from Mike Howell earlier today, having a good governance structure is very important. So while this may be somewhat comprehensive, it has been a long-standing footprint in the civil space for quite a number of years. And in my viewpoint, it's worked very well in terms of the ability to make decisions, but also to make a difference with our federal agencies. The FGDC steering committee is chaired by the Secretary of the Department of the Interior and vice chaired by the Deputy Director of Office of Management and Budget, which is very important when you're trying to deal with some of the challenges with resource restraints and things of that ilk. Over the past several years, especially in this administration, there's been quite a lot of activity around geospatial activity. It's been very important, I think, to the community. A number of things have occurred early on. The National Geospatial Advisory Committee was established back in 2008. Many of you who were involved in the intelligence community know there was the amendment to the Executive Order 12333 that sort of reinforced the use and power of geospatial technology. The establishment of data.gov happened early on in this administration, which primarily was about 80 to 85% geospatial information, if those of you are familiar with that particular capability. And we were very involved in that initial capability in establishing that catalog. Back in 2009, by 2010, one of the budget exercises was a call to action, was a direction to the FGDC to establish and stand up the geospatial platform, which is now geospatialplatform.gov. And I'll talk more about that in a few moments in terms of where we are. Subsequent to that, the OMB Circular A16 supplemental guidance was released, which gives direction to the agencies, further guidance on the policies and establishing and developing geospatial data, but also geospatial standards in the federal government. Early on in 2011, we launched the second version of the geospatial platform. A lot of this was developed based on lessons learned from the deep water oil spill that occurred in the Gulf back in 2010. Subsequent to that, we have developed a geospatial roadmap as well as a value proposition that has been utilized to help develop our business plan that we're currently using to substantiate and to support the platform itself. In addition, in 2012, we had the opportunity to be evaluated by the GAO, for those of you who have ever been involved in those processes. And from that, we were able to develop a new strategic plan, which I'll talk about in a few moments. OpenGov was then released in 2013, where there was some provisions for metadata that we helped develop that are also continuing to support some of the work that we're doing. And then last but not least is where I'd like to spend most of my time this afternoon, is to talk about our most recently developed NSDI strategic plan, where there's three key areas that I think has a relationship with some of the work and some of the things that we're hearing and the themes that we're hearing here this week. And then again, our most recent platform was released back in 2014, and even today we're in the process of developing a set of communities who are supporting a number of the National Geospatial Data assets that are part of this new plan that are being implemented today. And all this work over the past 6 to 7 years have given us an opportunity to develop a series of business requirements, allow us to begin to manage our data using a portfolio management approach, but more importantly, move towards a shared services paradigm to really be able to expose and to allow the use of information across all of our agencies, as well as with our stakeholder environment as well. So just real quickly, early in 2014, we released our new strategic plan that had a shared vision that was developed with the help from our stakeholders, and we had representation from the intel community involved in that as well. And there were three overarching strategic goals that we're focused on. recognizing that there are a number of, as we all know, being subjected to the challenges with budgets and all, that we wanted to focus and prioritize on 3 key areas. The first is a national shared service, which I'll talk about more in a few moments, which is really being conducted under the auspices of our geospatial platform. But we also wanted to ensure accountability and effective development and use of our assets. And this is where we're beginning to identify a suite of specific data sets that we believe are national in scope and have an impact across all the federal government. And then last but not least, the third focused area was to convene leadership of the National Geospatial Community, and I'll talk more about that in a few moments, which really is the support of our National Geospatial Advisory Committee. In terms of the shared service, we have been building the platform for the last 3 or 4 years. It serves as our focal point for exposing a number of data sets, but also provides an opportunity for collaboration. There are currently about 16 communities that are supporting a number of data themes that are available and exposed to the platform. And it really focuses on 4 key areas. Currently, it serves as the web presence and really as that technical instance for the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, where we're able to do collaboration through web presentations. It serves as the search catalog for all of the data that has been registered through data.gov as well as through the platform, where we have a shared catalog that we utilize. In addition, the National Geospatial Data assets are exposed through this web service. There are about 179 national geospatial data assets that have been identified and are currently exposed. But I think the more exciting aspect of the platform is this move toward shared IT and data investments, where we're developing a marketplace which will allow the private sector as well as our state and local governments to begin to share opportunities for collaboration, but also for investments. And then last but not least, we have a shared IT environment where we're beginning to use cloud technology to begin to host data in our infrastructure, primarily on behalf of not only our own federal agencies, but we're reaching out to state and local governments as well. As you heard from Mike also, we're in the throes of working with our colleagues over at the information sharing environment as well as DHS to begin to implement the GERA, the Geospatial Interoperability Reference Architecture. The idea here is to establish a live wiki where all stakeholders and folks interested can begin to interact with this architecture. And as Mike had alluded to earlier, it's not a true reference architecture, but really a compendium of best practices and guidances that will allow for us to be able to interoperate across a number of different environments. And we believe this is a very exciting opportunity for the entire community. We believe that this is one of the first steps that we've really have taken on in the last couple of years to really begin to work with our folks in our Intel community to be able to share some of these wonderful resources that are available. One of the challenges here, though, is really trying to serve the number of different communities that are involved. And as you can imagine, that could be quite a challenge, but we believe that and working with some of our standard organizations that have done some of the tests, the web testing and testbed activities, that we're going to have an opportunity to really to move this forward. Of course, the FGDC has a long-standing history of standards development, for those of you who are familiar with the organization, and we'll continue to do that as part of our National Shared Service goal within the new strategic plan. We have participated over a number of years in a number of these organizations. We've developed our own standards when these voluntary organizations are not conducting or developing some of these standards. And this really helps, I think, to really strengthen the interoperability across the number of frameworks that are available. We participate in ISO, ANSI, as well as the GWG, which is an organization under NGA, and also with the OGC. And I know there's a lot of acronyms there, but I think a number of us who are familiar with the standards organizations are familiar with these. But, you know, I think it's going to be important, though, as we evolve and begin to collaborate, you know, as necessary, that having the appropriate standards in place will make that a lot easier. And standards development is not easy, as we all know, but I believe it really substantiates and makes it a lot more effective when you do have certain standards that you can point to. And we do know, and as we've seen over the years, that not all the implementation's always the same, but having that base standard is always important to bring these things together. The second goal that we are pursuing as part of our strategic plan is developing a set of national geospatial data assets. And these are defined as those key data sets that we believe can be utilized by all agencies. And so there's a lot of focus and also investment on these particular data sets. I haven't listed those here, but there's about 179. And they're really focused on the 16 data themes that have been identified as part of the OMB Circular A16. And our thinking here is that we want to manage these data sets as a portfolio, which will help us to minimize costs and duplication, provides visibility and the status and accessibility to these national data sets, but also creates an ecosystem of shared and uniform data management and data management practices that can be shared and also repurposed. And we believe a number of the outcomes, there are a series of outcomes. One is to save resources. The other is really to provide a collaborative environment for investment. And as I stated earlier, there are 16 data themes that we're currently focused on. They're simulated around key themes like water, biota, infrastructure, and things of those ilk. And one of the more exciting activities that we've had, excuse me, most recently in working with our Homeland Security partners is the establishment of the Highfield Subcommittee under the auspices of the FGDC. And that partnership has really worked very well. As you heard from Dave earlier, this gives an opportunity to expose and to repurpose a lot of these data sets that have been developed at the local level through the FGDC paradigm. And excuse me, and the key here is to develop what we would see as a very successful partnership to obtain and provide secure access that's necessary to these data sets that can be useful and reusable, as I like to say, but also repurposed in a way that, again, with the thought and the thrust of saving resources, but repurposing taxpayer dollars. So, in terms of collaboration, as I stated earlier, we've established a number of communities on the platform that allows us to interact with our various agencies, but also we're providing access to our partners as well, state and local governments, as well as the private sector, as appropriate. And these communities, as we know, in today's speak, can serve as a meeting place to organize and develop, for us, the National Geospatial Data Assets. But these communities also allow for folks to share ideas as well as the results from their research, be able to repurpose and to expose applications, best practices, and lessons learned. And the bottom line here is really to be able to use this opportunity to connect subject matter experts from across the globe to citizen scientists as well as the public, government, and academia as well. I think one of the things that we're beginning to see and learn throughout this process is that a lot of these things are not only national but international. As Mike alluded to again earlier today, we had an opportunity to participate in the Geospatial World Forum a couple weeks ago, and there's just so many commonalities and so many common challenges across all the countries and throughout the globe. So the technology allows us to share and expose these best practices, which will only make the opportunity to share data more easily adaptable. In terms of convening leadership, as I stated earlier, the FGDC established the National Geospatial Advisory Committee back in 2008. And this particular advisory committee has really served our community quite well. In fact, we've had a number of representatives from NGA, as well as Keith Mosbach currently is serving on the committee as well. And some of the current topics that we're addressing are crowdsourcing. As we all know, this is a great resource and a wonderful tool, but also there are some challenges in terms of how do you manage that information and how do you characterize that information in decision making. The other is geospatial privacy. With the utilization and the advent of drones and using mobile technology to collect data, what are some of the policy considerations that we need to think about in reference to geospatial information? Our 3-depth elevation program is another area that, and that's LiDAR collection, and the use of LiDAR collection for a number of different purposes is one that the committee is currently taking a look at as well. And then of course, there have been they've been very active in participating in the work that we're doing with developing our new communications and outreach strategy, one that we believe is going to be very helpful as we continue to convey some of the things and activities that we're doing to support the geospatial community at large. And then of course Landsat, as we know, has been a long-standing capability for a number of years that's provided imagery for us that we've utilized in a number of different applications and also different domains. We're in the throes right now of executing the next set of nominations for the committee. So those of you who may have interest or thoughts of others who you think could serve on the committee, we ask that you share this information. The next round of appointments to the NGAC, the nominations are due, I should say, on July 17th. We made the announcement that the nominations were open back in, I think 2 weeks ago, like June 8th. And for those of you who do have interest, the information in the nomination process is available at the URL here at the bottom of the slide. We're also taking steps to go beyond just our advisory committee, and we're going to execute a number of different forums where we invite leaders from the geospatial community to discuss different issues and different topics. We're also planning to use these mechanisms to inform some of our subcommittee work as well, and to really help us better understand how we can manage some of the activities, the resources specifically, but also to kind of enhance and invigorate the geospatial coordination that's required. So we're seeking new members and partners and stakeholders, and we're actively building a new communication and outreach strategy to help articulate and advocate for these benefits. And we're also engaging new members, and one of the reasons why I'm here today is to begin to conduct outreach to the GeoIntel community, to begin to bring that bridge together in terms of the number of commonalities as we've seen this week. And many of the vendors that we see here are many of the vendors that we see in the civil activities as well. So with that, in closing, the FGDC is actively engaged in leading and developing innovative partnerships and opening new pathways for geospatial coordination. And we look forward to engaging further with the GeoIntel community and jointly addressing some of the challenges that we've heard about this week, but also opportunities to expand some of our location-based capabilities. And it's very enlightening, but also I think rewarding to see that there are a number of commonalities in both environments that I think gives us opportunities to take those on. So with that, I thank you for your attention.
Okay, we do have some questions from the floor for you.
Okay.
The first one, is the FGDC considering leveraging some of the vast archives of commercial satellite and aerial imagery as part of the geospatial platform? Some of the data sources are available already via online cloud sources.
The short answer to that is yes. The more challenging aspect of that, how do we do that? As I stated earlier, one of the capabilities that we're going to be implementing on the platform is the marketplace. And that marketplace may be for new investments, but may be for the opportunity to folks to but to catalog existing data that may be available for use in the community as well. We're anticipating having that capability up within the next 6 months, 6 to 8 months, I would say, but absolutely. I think one of the key points that we are aware of, and that I think you heard from Dave Alexander as well, is that the pyramid is sort of shifted. It used to be that the federal government collected a lot of the data that's currently available, but that's no longer the case. We're now seeing that there's just enormous amount of data information that's being developed by the private sector, and we want to be able to take advantage of that through public-private partnerships.
And I think you might have started answering this one already, but can you describe how FGDC fits with OGC, NGA, PMISC, and DHS?
Well, there are a number of different activities that have working relationships with all those organizations. And As an example, OGC, we work closely with OGC as part of our standards development. We are strategic members of OGC, which indicates that we are investing in that process. So we get to sit at the table and we get to help prioritize their agenda for the year. As part of the work that we're doing with the GERA, we're working with the ISC, with Mike and company to begin to implement that. And then NGA as well as DHS they have representation on our executive committee as well as on our steering committee. So there are a number of working relationships at different levels that, for all those entities that we have active engagement with.
All right, so perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about how you're interacting with the private sector and what it means for someone like you to be walking on the floor with all these fabulous vendors. All right, the question didn't say fabulous, they just said vendors.
Excuse me?
The question didn't say fabulous vendors, I added fabulous.
Well, that's a good adjective because, the FGDC has a long-standing history of doing outreach, and we've asked and have been having conversations with the advisory committee, the NGAC, about establishing effective public-private partnerships. And that's not always easy when you have to think about the laws and the boundaries that we have, but that doesn't preclude us from being creative and thinking outside the box and how do we actively participate and engage with the private sector. Our advisory committee is comprised of about 50% of the members are from the private sector. So we really utilize that environment as an opportunity to exchange ideas, but also to understand how we can more effectively work with them. There are always business relationships, and that's what the private sector does, and we just have to better understand how we can take advantage of those, but also be more transparent and more open in terms of how we execute some of the business processes that we have in government.
All right, next question. Could you please elaborate on the current status of geospatial privacy from your point of view?
Wow. I should let Mike do that. No, we do have some good news, though. One of the suggestions from the advisory committee is that they strongly suggested that we get involved with the Privacy Council of the federal government. And there were 3 or 4 of us from the NGAC that met with the Privacy Council about 8 months ago. And from that conversation, they've now identified a liaison from that privacy committee that's working with us to begin to think about solutions for some of these issues around geospatial privacy. And those are very dynamic and very challenging, but I think having this early engagement is going to help us. And also, one of the specific outcomes that we're looking towards is that those agencies that are currently considering policies or laws around this topic, we want to be engaged early in the process so we can help inform that process so there are no unintended consequences. So that's one of the things I think it's really been very beneficial from this conversation, establishing that liaison relationship that we have with the Privacy Council now.
Okay, as a follow-on to that one, you've described being part of a very open process and what you laid out in your timeline earlier. So how is it that that the FDGC can interact with the intelligence community, which typically is not quite as open?
Well, I think from my viewpoint, I think some of those walls are coming down, especially in our conversations that we've had with our colleagues at NGA. I mean, as you heard from Director Cardillo this week, they're ready to begin to open up and expose and share this data where they can. So we believe that we can help them understand what the requirements are from the unclassified side, to be able to inform that process. Now there are a number of, as you heard from the keynote the other day, the lawyers and policy wonks, we call them, involved to kind of help inform us to make sure that we don't cross any lines. But I think there's more opportunity than there are barriers. So having these conversations and engaging with our colleagues who have that mission responsibility gives us an opportunity to really expose this information even more so. And we're taking small steps now. We're beginning to share some of the data from our colleagues at DHS and NGA through the platform now. And as we evaluate each and every data set as necessary, we'll begin to expose more of those in the upcoming years.
And so you provided a great segue for our next session, where we are going to have a lawyer and a policy wonk up here. All right, last question for you. How has GEOINT 2015 helped FGDC thus far?
It's been really educational. I think from my involvement this week, to see how vastly things have changed over the last 5 years, just the last 5 years, and how things are more open, and how there are more things we have in common than there are differences. And I think we need to begin to cross-fertilize these environments more so. And I think it would be a good idea to invite more agencies to be involved in some of the program activities. And we've been talking to Keith Mosbeck about that a little bit, and I think there's an opportunity to do that. And just in our own private conversations, again, we see there are more commonalities in things that we're doing. We're all looking for the solutions. We're all using the technology. We all have interest in the data. And there's a lot of data. I mean, there's more data than we can deal with at this point in time, but we need to migrate that and transition that into information that informs decision making. And that's, I think those were the opportunities are, and the technologies available to allow us to do that and do some cross-sharing.
Thank you so much. If we could have a round of applause, please.